Good morning or good afternoon from wherever you are joining, and welcome to the April installment of NPR's virtual event series for supporters. I'm Jeff Schoenfeld, the chair of the NPR Foundation Board's Task Force on Programming and Podcasts. Our task force's charge is to raise awareness and funds for NPR's programming division, which plays a critical role in NPR's goal to reflect and serve a more diverse audience. Two members of NPR's senior leadership team are joining us today to talk more about what podcasts mean for the mission of public radio. Anya Grundmann is Senior Vice President for Programming and Audience Development and has decades of experience with NPR and media. Michael Smith, Chief Marketing Officer, joined NPR last year and has already made a tremendous impact as one of the key architects of NPR's strategic plan. Anya and Michael will introduce the two new hosts of Invisibilia, the first chart-topping podcast created by a team of women, which is undergoing a transformation of sound, cadence, and structure in order to respond to important cultural moments and attract a new generation of audiences. Today, you'll hear about how NPR's programming will play a key role in developing new talent, in reflecting stories from diverse communities, and in finding and serving new public radio audiences that fully represent America. You were invited to this event because you support public radio as a listener and hopefully as a donor. As you take part in today's conversation, I hope you'll consider an investment in NPR's podcast work. And I'm pleased to announce that the Podcast Task Force is sponsoring a $1 million challenge in support of new programming at NPR. My fellow trustees and I have committed to matching the first $150,000 in gifts to get us on our way to developing brilliant, insightful, timely new podcasts at NPR. Your gift, whether an investment in a specific podcast or funds for the team to use flexibly as they develop new ideas, will be instrumental in NPR's ability to fulfill its mission of creating a more informed public through programming that reflects and reaches all America. I invite you to reach out to NPR development staff or to me or any member of the podcast task force to learn more about the impact you can have on this important work. If you don't already have a contact at NPR, please use the email address in the chat to get in touch. And with your partnership, we can reflect, inform, and inspire our entire country today and for many years to come. With that, I'd like to turn this session over to Anya and Michael. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us today. My name is Anya Grundmann, and I'm thrilled to be here with Michael Smith, who's a new colleague at NPR who's made a tremendous difference, and we formed a fantastic partnership. I started at NPR as an intern, so the journey had an incredible journey in the evolution of what NPR has become, and I'm just so glad to be joined by such an incredible colleague with such great media experience and such perspective that's really informing our work going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Anya. I've been a longtime NPR fanboy from college years, just a listener on the radio. And then when NPR got into podcasting, it was just a newfound love in that medium. And I feel like I'm playing, being I feel like I'm a Yankee fan who's actually getting to work alongside the manager and architect of the team. It's a really great treat because Anya is, as you'll hear later, is really the driving force behind the growth and development of our podcast business. So just really excited to be working with her on this such important work. So I think we can get into the presentation.
And then you're gonna meet Kia and Yowei, whose podcast just launched last week, and they're doing such a great job. And But as an intro, I think, we wanted to share some of the thinking going on at the organization. A sneak peek.
Yeah, I'll help put some context as to where we're going content-wise at NPR, and also and how marketing is supporting that. I'm going to share my screen. We're calling this the Reflect America Plan. And when you think about reflecting America, why is that important, and why does that matter? Well, it's really in the DNA of public
Michael,
Yeah.
I think we're seeing your speaker notes and stuff.
Oh, okay, we got the wrong
Yeah.
window up. Hang on a sec. Okay. Let me do it one more time. Okay, are you seeing the full
Yes.
presentation deck? Okay, great. There we go. When you think about reflecting America, you go back to the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, which is what launched public media, both the television and radio. And there's a quote in there that says, public media will be an expression of diversity and excellence, and which will constitute a source of alternative telecommunication services for all citizens of the nation. If you also look at the DNA and sort of the founding of NPR itself, Bill Simmering, who was the first program director for NPR, he said back in the early 70s, if you have diversity of the country reflected on air, you have a diverse audience. If people hear their own voice and their own perspective being acknowledged, they will pay attention. If you look at America back in 1970, when NPR was first founded, it's very different than it is today, obviously. I mean, 83% of the country was white and only 17% of the country was what we consider people of color. And just to put a more visual face on that, the New York Times did an interesting look at a public elementary school in Kew Gardens, Queens. And this is a shot of the class in 1970. If you look at NPR, our first national news program called All Things Considered, you look at the staff and team that worked on that show back in the early 70s. You can see that we reflected America at that time. But a lot changed since then. If you look at the percentage of the American population that is of color and how that's changed over the last 40 to 50 years, you can see the consistent trend as America has been diversifying. And if you look at America today, we're about 60% white and 40% diverse. That same Kew Gardens Elementary School, I took a look at a picture on their website just from a few weeks ago, and you can see the difference in that very same class as you compare to 1970, just to give a real visceral look at how America's changed. But NPR, if you compare our audience to America, we are not reflecting America at the current time. Our audience right now is about 75% white and 25% people of color when you look at it across all platforms. Another thing that's changing is how people consume audio content. NPR obviously started as a broadcast radio centric organization, but in recent years, podcasting has been the fastest growing audio platform in America, and especially among younger people, as you can see here, the amazing growth in listenership. And diverse audiences are growing even faster. You can see Hispanic audience, Black audiences, Asian audiences have been growing 5 to 6 times over the last 10 years. And that's meant that the podcast audience has been diversifying. From 2011 to today, you can see that the audience is about 57% white and 43% people of color. Another trend that's been happening is that people are now getting more of their news content on digital social networking platforms like YouTube and Instagram and even TikTok. So what does that mean for NPR? Well, when you look at our audience across platforms and get a little bit more detailed by who we're reaching, you'll see that we're actually benefiting from this change in platform consumption. It's great news to us to see that our podcasts are actually 42% people of color and our YouTube content is 35% people of color. So we have been able to find audiences that are more diverse on these platforms as compared to our traditional radio audience. But the big challenge for us is if you look at our reach across all platforms, radio is still where we reach most Americans. Podcasting is growing, but it's still a smaller piece of our audience. And then things like YouTube and Apple News are much smaller. So the challenge for us is to grow our podcast audience and grow our audience on new platforms like YouTube and other social networking platforms. And we feel like that's the way, our best path to diversify our audience overall. So I'm going to hand it off to Anya to talk about the content initiatives to actually help grow the audiences on these digital platforms.
Thank you, Michael. It's been, I think of the work that I've been lucky enough to be doing at NPR, first running NPR Music and then our podcasting and programming has been a space where we've really been stretching ourselves into new spaces. And it's a very special organization that allows itself to really innovate from within and not just stick to the tried and true. And I've been really gratified to be participating in and driving NPR in reaching new spaces and new audiences. And so we just want to talk about three major things that we're going to be focused on going forward. And the first two are about, the content areas that we're really pushing on and podcasting with its growth. I think we had 2 million podcast weekly listeners, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and now we have 12 million weekly. We're reaching 25 million every month. We have 150 million downloads, and the audience is in their 30s. And as Michael showed, is very diverse. So it's really a next generation audience that's really contemporary in the way that people use media. So it's been very exciting for us to branch out and to try new things and bring NPR into new spaces. So right now, actually, there's an all staff happening at NPR. I'm going to move to the next slide, Michael. Thanks. Yeah, so we're going to be doubling down on podcasts. We've created about 15 new podcasts in the last few years, and they range all across topic areas. And half of them have been really generated by ideas from the staff, and half have been about strategic initiatives that we thought were going to make a big difference to NPR, like some of our news portfolio. But right now, if you go to the next slide, these three people are on an all staff talking about a working group that we've set up, because one of the groups that we're really severely underperforming with is our Latinx audiences. And so we're putting a laser focus on that. But for some reason, it's been especially hard for NPR to be reaching Latinx audiences at the scale that we think we should be. And so we're exploring why that is and what the best strategies are for moving forward. Next slide. So other strategies that we're working on is bringing new voices and perspectives into NPR. So we've been doing a lot of what I call unleashing from within, because we have the largest audio journalism newsroom in America. And so we've really spent a lot of time nurturing that into the podcast space. But I think there's also perspectives that we're probably missing and that we could bring into the environment. So we're going to be looking at that. We're in conversations. This is sort of quiet. We're in conversations with Jay Williams about doing, he's a former athlete and ESPN host, about doing a podcast about what it means to move through adversity. And he's a really incredible guy. So we've been talking to him, and we have other projects in the works. Next slide. Another approach we're taking is, this is a sort of rough outline of the topics. There's a measuring platform called Podtrac, which really measures how podcasts are doing out in the world, and they have categories. And you can see there are certain categories where we're pretty dominant. And we actually have, we've been toggling between the #1 and #2 podcast studio in America. And that's partially because we have #1 podcasts in a lot of spaces. And we have a huge news and politics footprint. We're really strong on the business side and society and culture, but you can see in other areas we have opportunity. So we're taking a look at where we can double down to provide audience service and insightful journalism, expanding the frames of the stories we're telling, and so forth. So science and tech and kids programming are opportunities for us when we reach new audiences. Next slide. Then another thing that we really pay attention to is like I said, we have many top podcasts in America. I think we may have half of the top 25. And so when you have an asset like that, the really smart thing is to double down. And so we are doubling down on our core brands. Code Switch is launching a radio show this summer. We're thinking about season 2 of Louder Than a Riot, which was a hip hop and policing podcast that really told stories in a totally different framework than have been told before by NPR. And it really gives you an insight into some of the systemic issues that are in the way that America is being policed, told from a different perspective than you usually hear. And then we're also building a creative innovation space around Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, so they can develop new comedy programming. They've also developed an event series, the Comedy Club, featuring panelists and new voices. And also we've been building out Planet Money, the world of Planet Money, into multiple podcasts and the TikTok channel. So we're really focused on doubling down where we see success and using that success to also reach the audiences we want to reach and transform, honestly, some of our programs that might have been speaking a little bit too much to purely white affluent audiences, but making our programming even more welcoming. Next slide. And then, of course, we are the beneficiary of being connected to an incredible public radio network of stations, hundreds of stations that cover the broadcast reach of 98% of America. And so we are actively working on ways to leverage the work and the journalism and the footprint of our station network in podcasting. We launched the first ever in podcasting history local national news product, which is called Consider This. And we have 10 participating stations creating, so we have a national podcast hosted by Audie Cornish every afternoon about a major topic of the day. And then we're using behind the scenes technology to stitch local versions from 10 different stations onto the podcast. So that was a bold new experiment, which we're going to continue to grow. But there's many ways that we're going to be looking at leveraging the local reporting, the expertise across the public radio system. And we're also, podcasting has also been a space where we've brought up and supported the development of talent, not only at our own network. You'll see later when Michael talks more about the marketing campaigns, you'll see a whole new class of NPR journalists are rising up. And it's a very talented, very diverse crew of folks with different points of view and perspectives, and all incredibly engaging. And the same thing is happening at our member stations. So this is a really thrilling part of the work, and you meet Kia and Yoe as two examples of that who came up through the organization. Next slide. And then in addition to podcasting, which is related to leveraging our podcast, we're also have our R&D lab approach to really making sure that the future of NPR is secure on whatever platforms the audiences are going to want to need inspiring information, news, cultural commentary, and work that really helps people center their lives and their intentions. So one thing that we're focusing is on visuals. And as Michael pointed out, our visual platforms are have a very diverse audience. Next slide. There we go. We actually do have a presence on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. We have 5 million people subscribed to our Instagram channel, and it is, when we've done surveys, it is reflecting a different version of NPR than you might expect, which is very exciting. So we're using that as an R&D lab, and we're going to double down on that. We have 2 different YouTube channels. NPR Music has a blowout hit with Tiny Desk concerts. I think we're just under 2 billion views on our Tiny Desk concerts, and 500 million in the last year alone. And that only happened after we diversified the music and the artists that we were featuring. And we're really proud of the important footprint that work has done. And we also have a news and information channel, which we're going to be investing in. And we have some really, really innovative work, like this Frederick Douglass video that our video team tracked down descendants of Frederick Douglass and had them deliver his 4th of July speech. It's an incredibly moving, original piece of work. And then as part of Planet Money, we spun out a TikTok channel for Planet Money that has 500,000 followers and millions of people liking and engaging. And it has the Planet Money trademark humor, but it's putting it out there in different perspectives and with a different flair for younger audiences. But we know that our journalism and the spirit of NPR can travel onto new platforms, and we need to be there to figure it out. Next slide. And so we're asking ourselves questions about what is NPR of the future, and knowing that a lot of our audiences will be on visual platforms. What does NPR sound and feel like in more visual spaces? Next slide. And also looking at longer form sticky projects. And we really care about investigative, original enterprise work on the audio side, but we also want to make sure that our enterprising work across public media is actually showcased in the places where people will love it and engage with it. And so we've been starting to make some short documentaries, and this one premiered, this St. Coltrane project premiered at the Sundance Film Festival this year. It's part of our partnership with them. So we're thinking more about also enterprise and long form in the same way that we have enterprise and long form in our podcast. Next slide. And the other space that we are looking at is things like this. No, NPR has a really powerful ability to connect with audiences and create experiences that are important to people's lives. And so as we speak, there are 10 fellows as part of the How I Built This Entrepreneur Fellowship Program who are going through a training program hosted by NPR, and there's going to be a kind of Shark Tank-like panel, and one of them is going to win $50,000. We have a student podcast challenge that we do where thousands of classrooms across America create podcasts under the direction of NPR, and then we select a winner. And really incredible stories. I think one of the winners this year, a girl was tracing her family DNA. And then we also have the Tiny Desk contest. So we have musicians gathering, and we had 8,000 entries to contests, and we have trivia nights. And so we want NPR to be vibrant and active and engaging in the world. And we think that's a powerful way to reach new audiences. We're going to do a tour of historically Black colleges and universities with some of our programs, and Code Switch. So it's a very dynamic part of what we do, and we're going to be continuing to build that out for the audiences we want to reach. Next slide. So those are some of the sneak peeks about how we're thinking about programming, but of course, we also need to make sure that people find out about what we do.
Yeah, on the marketing side, our biggest challenge is raising our awareness. You know, historically, NPR has spent its time marketing to the people who love NPR. I mean, literally, we run promotions on our own radio shows to other radio listeners. We've been running promotions in our own podcasts, other podcast listeners. So we've basically been preaching to our own choir, and we've really been missing a lot of younger, more diverse new audiences that just aren't aware of NPR. And if you look at the awareness data, you'll see across the United States, only 30% of all Americans have actually ever heard of NPR. And that number is a little bit better among podcast users, but when you look at people of color, only 22% of Americans of color have actually heard of NPR. So, you know, you can look at that as a negative thing, but also I think it's a huge opportunity because we've got such great content that I think that's right for the zeitgeist and where the minds of young people are today. They just don't know about us. So how do we get them to know about us? Through marketing. And we've started for the first time really in an aggressive way to spend paid media off our own platforms behind our content. We've been doing show-by-show campaigns initially. Last year we started with we picked a few podcasts that we thought had high opportunity. Code Switch, Throughline, It's Been a Minute, and Louder Than a Riot. We've spent paid media basically publicizing them on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and in Facebook and Twitter, and just getting people more aware of those shows. And we saw great results. Small budgets at first. We saw increases in downloads, more clicks, more listens. And so we're going to continue that strategy. And actually, the next show in this show-by-show strategy is Invisibilia, which, as you guys know, it's a show that launched in 2015. It's now going into its 7th season. A big credit to Alex Spiegel and Hannah Rosen for the first 6 successful seasons of the show, which built it to 800,000 downloads a month. But now they've passed the torch to incredible new voices, Yowei Shaw and Kia Miaka Natis, who have worked on the show for years, but now are stepping up to be the face of the show. And they really bring their entire selves and personalities and experiences to the show. And creatively, what we're trying to do is evolve it to be more edgy, a little more playful, more youthful. And so I'm just going to show some examples of how we're marketing it right now. If you open up your Apple Podcast app, you'll see it be promoted in the recommended shows. You'll see it on Spotify, whether you're on desktop or on a mobile device. And here's an example of one of the audio spots that you'll hear for this show.
I'm Yowei Shaw.
I'm Kia Miaka Natis.
We're the hosts of the NPR podcast, Invisibilia.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
And now we're going to drop.
Wow. We tell stories, intimate, surprising stories.
Sorry, I just need a good cry.
Stories that wrestle with today's big, messy questions.
You're going to be thrown for a loop.
This is not a joke.
It was,
Oh my gosh.
wild.
Yeah.
But it's like a good time.
Where's the champagne?
Listen now to Invisibilia from NPR.
And here's a video spot that we're running.
Have you ever noticed how when you learn something new about somebody, it changes the way you see them?
The person in front of you still looks the same, but what's actually changed is you.
So in addition to the show-by-show campaigns, we're going to step things up another notch later this year with a portfolio-wide brand campaign to really position the entire breadth of NPR podcasts as the number one destination for people when you're building your ultimate podcast playlist. And as Anya said before, we've got leading podcasts in so many different categories, and so many of them with diverse hosts and diverse storytelling. And they're delivering a very diverse audience, and we think we can push that even further. So we've got a brand campaign scheduled for this fall, which will communicate that we have a wide range of shows from politics, money, science, pop culture, race, culture, and we're going to highlight the hosts that have the most appeal to people of color audiences. And one of the key things through the campaign is to really help reframe people's perception of NPR and reveal the infinitely varied people who make up NPR. A lot of people still, I think of NPR as the founding. People talk about the founding mothers, the Susan, Scott Simons, Stephen Skeech, the people that come to mind right away when people think of NPR in general. But I think there is as you see on the screen, a whole new generation of voices that are making NPR happen. And I think that when people are exposed to them, and we found it already in some of the focus group research that we've done, that they're extremely resonant and really connect with people. In fact, 2 of them are here today to talk to you. The hosts of Invisibilia, Yowei Shaw and Kia Miaka Natis, are here to talk about their show and just their experiences. I think you'll get a real treat out of engaging with them. So let me hand it over to Yowei and Kia.
Hello, hi.
Hi. Hi. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
You just launched last week with an incredible show about reparations, experiment in Vermont. How does it feel to be out in the world?
Thrilling and a relief. A thrilling relief.
a relief for Kia. We still got four weeks to go, but it feels surreal, honestly, to be out.
What does that feel like? I mean, you've been working for about half a year at least on this.
Yeah. I mean, I feel really proud of our team. We have pulled together a lot of different things. And, what was a adequate amount of time, but it always feels like it's not enough time. Like I could have worked on this story probably for 2 more months if you let me. But yeah, I think just feeling really proud and really excited about the feedback that we've gotten back from listeners. It's been really, really positive. And that's been like a happy surprise, because that was totally one of my concerns, was just like, it's different. I don't know. You never know how people are going to respond when things change. But the audience has been really receptive, and that's been really exciting to see.
You want to tell us a little bit about that story, Kia?
Yeah, so the story is about sort of a DIY reparations project in Vermont that I kind of accidentally found online. I was looking for stories about utopia, and then was like just going through different websites in the intentional community world, and landed on this link that just brought me to this letter and these spreadsheets. And I was just like kind of blown away, because I had a hunch like people have been doing sort of individual reparations efforts for a while, but this was the largest that I had found, and went about it in such a different way. And so just like diving deep into that world and learning more about what motivated the people to start it, how it impacted their community, what kind of questions, the things that they wrestled with, and really wanting to like surface that for listeners of just sort of like, reparations is an idea, but these people kind of experienced it in a way. And so really just, we always talk about it as a social experiment. Like they just kind of did this thing, and we kind of just document it and put those questions forth to our audience too.
And one of the things I think about when I think about NPR's mission is that it's always been about helping you learn new things, or think about the things that you think you know in new ways. And one of the things I love about this show is that you take topics that everyone's been talking about reparations obviously for years, but the lens you put it through, it lets me see it in a way that I've never really thought about it. What are some of the other stories that you're doing this year?
Well, we have a 3-part series coming up. It is our first series at Invisibilia. Basically, I got a tip last summer, a weird tip about Stockton, California having its own version of Russian trolls. So obviously I made a call or two. And then I ended up down this rabbit hole that led me to more conspiracy theories, And basically the series is looking at what happens when local news dies and what can fill the void for any agenda. And it is an investigative series. It's also asking these questions around like why people distrust the mainstream media like NPR, why is there this revolt against the mainstream media happening in Stockton, California? It is not your average story about misinformation. It really doesn't fit sort of the neat box of those kinds of stories in my head. All of my assumptions have been thrown for a loop. And so what I am trying to do is really understand how misinformation is impacting the city's power structure and also its culture, and then also what can be done about it. So that's one big series coming up.
It's a really great series. Lots of interesting people and wonderful voices, and just tape from, like, you really get deep into it. It's a lot of fun. And then our last episode is about Slow TV, which some of you may know about, but it's a sort of a TV show from Norway, I believe it is, that just kind of does these really boring, seemingly boring documentations of like, here is a ship sailing down the coastline, and it'll follow it for like 8 hours. And that sounds, as I describe it, I'm sure everyone's like, oh, I'd love to see that. But, it sounds boring. But as it turns out, the nation loved it. Like tons of people turned in. It turned into this runaway success. And so the story from our producer, Abby Wendell, is looking at this sort of experience and then asking the question, why isn't this happening in America? What does it say about our own desires for entertainment and also our media system that, some forms of television and entertainment just don't seem to happen in America? And also like what are the pros and cons of that sort of genre of TV existing? And then we're going to cap it off with our own experiment in slow radio in conjunction with the 50th year anniversary of NPR. So it'll be our fun little sort of weird radio art to end the season on, which we all love.
Didn't you all ask all your audiences last year to send you nature sounds?
Yeah.
We did.
We have hundreds and hundreds, like seriously, y'all, we have this beautiful database of all these sounds, like penguins scattering across the ice, a high school back before the pandemic, a high school band practicing, just like all these different sounds from all these different places. And we are incorporating them in our episodes as like a fun new way to shout out our listeners and try to create community. And also we have amazing new theme music for the new show. And Tariq, the artist, also found a way to incorporate some of our listener sounds. Like you won't really be able to recognize them, but he incorporates them in the music too.
Well, you're certainly like a far cry from where you were a year ago.
Yes.
True.
The journey of 1,000 years.
I mean,
in like
that
12
was
months.
You were in a totally different, we still had Elise and Hannah last year. We thought we were actually shutting down the show because it had kind of reached the end of its life cycle.
Yeah.
What the heck happened?
I know, who knows, really? It has been a lifetime. Lily, do you want to start?
Yeah. Okay, so back last year, basically we thought the show was over. And it was really sad for all of us at the show because, we really love making the show. And we thought, and the host had decided to move on. But then there was this underground movement to sort of revive the show. And it happened in all these different places, starting with Elise, actually, she sort of seeded an idea. And then separately, Kia called me up and was like, yo, do you want to do this? Let's save the show. And then also from programming, we also got calls from folks in programming who were like, y'all, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to revitalize this beloved show and try to bring it to the next generation and a new life cycle. And then we had to basically organize amongst ourselves and decide who's going to do what, and in 2 weeks, and have all these meetings where we had really honest conversations about power structure, duties, what kind of vision for the show we wanted to have. And then we put together a PowerPoint presentation to pitch Anya and some other folks at NPR. And then
it was amazing. Yeah, it was, it was such a great moment, right? Because I think we made Anya cry, which
I don't see to share, Anya.
It's true. How could I help myself? You see these two.
No, but it was really beautiful. And I'll never forget, Anya, what you said, which is sometimes it's really about timing. I think even my personal journey to coming to work on the show, which I'd been a long time fan and in the evangelizer of singing my friends' episodes and then just kind of not even on purpose, but kind of being found by Invisibilia and starting to work there and finding a real intellectual home for the type of work that I wanted to do and the topics that I was interested in and the people that I worked with and the environment. It really was just a beautiful coincidence of events that kind of led to this thing. And Yoey and I had to get really close really quickly. And we continue to work on it. We've done improv and we've had host coaching, we're constantly, I think what's beautiful is we have a really complementary system together. So we share a lot of tastes and styles, but I think we also really balance each other out. So it's definitely been nothing but timing and sort of I don't know, the universe coming together in the right ways.
I've been thinking about it as a public radio fairy tale.
Well, it definitely seems like you guys are the right show for the right time, because it seems that today millennials and Gen Zs are maybe one of the most critical generations of the current world, the current power structures. They're really taking a close look at why things are the way they are and why and how they could be different. And it seems that that's in the DNA. Michelle, how do you guys think about that, being in that generation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have a 15-year-old, well, excuse me, he just turned 16, a 16-year-old brother. And so he keeps my like finger on the pulse of what is happening and what young Gen Z think and what's important to them. And I like really value that sort of like small group of intelligence around that. And I think in the characters in my story and the topics that we're interested in, I really do want to speak to this generation. They're extremely engaged. They're really informed. They really care about these type of things, and they want to be active in society. And so it's really exciting to try to reach that audience, but also somewhat impressively hold on to the audience that Invisibilia has. We've already seen like with our downloads that no one has dropped off. Like the listens are actually up season over season compared to where we were last season. So, and that's before the marketing has started, so now that the marketing is kicking up and now we're going to be bringing in new listeners, it's really exciting to think about creating sort of this like intergenerational coalition of people who are interested in the things that our show talks about.
Yeah, I mean, if the only thing I would have to add to that is that our pitch meetings are really different, I would say. Like I remember, being on the show for a while and having to do, a lot of explanation and just sort of a lot of like justification for some of the stories that I was interested in or that my colleagues would be interested in. And it's a very different kind of experience to like actually be in the decision-making seat and to not have to do, like, honestly, it's like a lot less tiring in some ways. It's like we don't have to explain as much about why certain stories are important or, why these are the questions on our minds. So that's one difference that feels really special.
I think that is one of the things that we're trying to do across NPR is making sure that the story ideas that will really meet the audiences that we want to reach and that will be relevant to Americans are getting through. And that means those of us who have more years behind us maybe giving up some preconceived notions about what the right story is or the right way to look at it, and opening our arms and hearts and eyes to new ways of looking at the world, and be kind of fearless about that. And it's not hard to do when you have such talented, energetic, inspiring people in front of you. You just throw it all out. Here you go. So
well, I think that, one of the advantages too of us having been producers so recently is that we know what it's like to not have as much power on a show. We know what it's like to have to fight for an idea to come to fruition, or, we just know, we understand that difference in power. And so one of the things that I think we're trying to build into our system and into our culture as a show is this like practice of, just honest conversation early and often, and like being committed to recalibration. To go back to your point around like what kinds of story ideas are important, and sometimes there's like conflict about how to see stories or how to see whether a story is even a story. It's like we have those blind spots too. Of course we do. We all do. So I think the key for us that we're trying to build into our practice is just like acknowledge that is happening, and that's okay, and it's fine, and like let's just talk about it, and like let's continually be surprised and like learn things.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for both your energy and your creativity and your drive and the inspiration, and for being so real. We want to go to some questions now, I think. Michael, do you want to see?
Yeah, we've got we have some audience questions that have come in. In fact, the first one is, speaking of conspiracy theories, how do we reach people in this sort of polarized media world who have these out of bounds ideas?
That is the $1,000,000 question. I think from my reporting on one microcosm, I can't speak to like the general problem just yet, but I think that what I've learned is that a conspiracy theory scholar told me that we all think that everyone else believes the conspiracy theory. You know, he was willing to bet that everyone probably believes in at least a few conspiracy theories. So I think one of the things that I've learned from my reporting is just to stop thinking about this like us versus them, or like we're above people who believe conspiracy theories. Like that is kind of a false binary. And it also might feel a little, it's like elitist, you know, like it's not, people will feel that disdain, you know, the folks that do believe conspiracy theories about the media. So one thing that I've learned from my reporting is the importance of really engaging with people who believe different things and being responsive, creating systems with feedback loops and taking people seriously. People, not everybody, you know, like there are bad faith actors out there, but there are good faith. There's a lot of good faith actors too, who are just trying to get useful, accurate information and are being inundated with a lot of false stuff out there. And it's very confusing to navigate. So that's one of the lessons I've learned from my reporting. Not an easy solution at all.
Someone's
guys-
asked me what other stories did you want to tell this season but couldn't, and why?
Ooh,
Yahweh, you had one.
I did have one. It's a little racy. Okay, so this is I was interested in representation and what does representation actually get us? And there's this, because I've been on like the Asian masculinity beat for a little bit, there's this like constant question around like, where are all the Asian men in porn? Where are they? Where are the Asian male porn stars? And so there's this movement afoot. Historically, there's been like a few big porn stars who've kind of like taken it on as like a racial justice cause. And there's, yeah, really interesting stories there. So yeah, I was kind of, I'm still thinking about that story. We just didn't get around to it. I got more reporting to do.
Yeah, there's always like some topics that tend to float in like our Invisibilia universe where we're always like, we always want to do a story about that, but we just never find like the right angle or the right narrative or like the right way to tell it. And so there's kind of like a waiting list of a number of stories that we're just kind of like waiting for the moment to be right to try to figure out how to tell.
There's another question about your creative process, and they're asking, how is that carried over from the previous hosts, or hasn't, or maybe it hasn't, or what has changed?
I think it's really carried over actually in how, like, our show is incredibly collaborative. We rely so much on group brain. So a lot of the like creative intellectual work that ends up in our stories or in how things get sound designed or how a story gets told, we'll come up with those ideas at meetings together. So we've created, I think we've formalized the process actually more. We have weekly editorial meetings where we have this open space to just kind of play, you know, like anyone can bring a story idea or like a story quandary or like a production or even an inspiration for production. And then just this open space to just like group brain together and troubleshoot. And I feel like that was always the way it was before at Invisibilia, and like we've carried it over and just tried to formalize it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we really invested in that I think listeners have already commented on as far as like our sound being different is we really worked on finding new music for our library. finding music is notoriously hard. And a lot of times in podcasting, people use kind of the same services. You might hear the same song. And that's, that's not necessarily bad, but I think for us to really want to differentiate ourselves in the market and also to really draw in the ear of younger listeners, we worked really hard to find new artists to collaborate with, like Infinity Knives, who is just like a young indie artist from Baltimore, who has this wonderful sort of diverse sound where he has all this sort of skill and talent in different genres and layers them together in ways that are really rich, as well as, finding new artists to get their catalog. And it becomes our exclusive music. So we don't have to worry about like somebody else using the same song. And so it really, I think, has helped sort of give our sound a different vibe.
Well, and every show we have at NPR has a slightly different production process because it's my belief we don't want everything sounding the same. It's not easy to get to the perfect version of every single show's production process. So I spend a lot of time trying to help shows get there. But that's our vision, is that NPR is popping out all over and is sounding, exciting and interesting and not, cookie cutter.
Yeah. Definitely don't want any cookie cutter at NPR. We promise you that.
Well, I think that's we've got some questions, but I think for Anya and myself, which I guess we'll take a shot at. One of them is, what will the strategy, I guess this overall Reflecting America approach, have us consider making changes to current hosts on other programs, including news magazines?
Well, I think there's been a natural evolution in the hosting over time on the news magazines. So, and I think there's a host vacancy right now that they're going to fill. Two of the most recent host hires actually came from Planet Money. So what we're seeing is a shift in the fact that basically podcasting is giving people the ability to get experience in being hosts. And so we have a lot more sort of people in the environment and also in the general podcasting ecosystem who have experience and who may be ready to step in. And so that's what we're seeing. There didn't used to be such a big sort of news magazine host farm team. But what we also noticed that when we do something that sounds different in podcasting and they're sitting right next to the news things, it actually affects the sounds of the news programs. So we know that when we started the NPR Politics podcast, that right away some of that sound got integrated into the news magazines and live specials and so forth. So it's a little bit, if you show don't tell, that it's happening over time.
Another question is, how do we see this strategy playing out for member stations? And I think member stations are going through the same challenge and opportunity that we have, which is to reach the next generation of listeners, younger, more diverse listeners. You've got to do it through podcasting and through digital content. And so many of them are ramping up their podcast efforts and starting to see success. And one of the things we've been doing is trying to partner with them and maximize, as Anya mentioned before, the power of this local national combination. And consider this week as an example of that, where we have about 10 minutes of national content, then partnered with 5 minutes of local content. And in several of the markets, it's been an opportunity for the stations to provide a platform for new, more diverse voices in their local segments, and create a great training and development ground to find new talent and new voices. So that's an example, I think. And there was a question about, how does the new Apple and Spotify subscription service news play into our plan? I guess I'll just say one quick thing about that is that as we go from radio to on-demand and podcasting, we also need to transition our support model for that. In radio, we've gotten support from membership donations and from sponsorship support. In podcasting, it's all been sponsorship. We haven't found a way to allow people to directly support the great podcast work that we do. And so these new subscription services that platforms like Spotify and Apple are launching are a great opportunity to open up that revenue source for this fast emerging part of our work.
Right, and some of the work, the business content, some of the bigger podcasts, it's really, it's pretty easy to support it on the sponsorship side. But we have a lot of programming like Invisibilia and others, which are very challenging to support because real journalism and real investigative work and original storytelling takes a lot of time and effort, and you can't do 52 weeks of what Yowei and Kia are doing without a tremendous outlay of resources. That's why they're doing sort of seasonals right now. But that stuff is not really fully supportable by sponsorship revenue. And so we're just grateful for your support for our enterprise storytelling and also coverage of issues that may not be as attractive to sponsors, because we are a mission-based organization that wants to reach America in intriguing, important ways, and we are not a commercial organization, and we do not make our content decisions based on their market viability. It's helpful when our great ideas are also supportable in that way, but that's not our essential mission. And so we need a more robust funding model. And we know that Invisibilia historically has had tremendous love. The love factor is super high. So we're hoping that's helpful. And I think you can see why.
And it looks like we have a final question. It says, one of the aspects that I love about Invisibilia is that they're able to tap into more local grassroots stories, movements, for example. How is NPR as a whole finding that balance of utilizing popular mainstream hosts to increase listenership, but also be tapped into smaller communities and cultures? Now, I guess, I think for both of you guys, I know Yowei, you came from a station, right? From a more grassroots background yourself.
Yeah. I started out as an outsider in media. I was running a youth radio project, like a DIY youth radio project, and we were trying to infiltrate the mainstream media public radio station to get our youth on the air. And then we managed to do that, and then I started doing more stories for them. And I think I think that kind of, I really miss that work, honestly. And I feel like that has really informed a lot of my own just approach to media making and reporting. And I'm really grateful for projects at NPR like Story Lab, where we get to I've been lucky enough to get to be a mentor on a few projects, and just getting to work with amazing local grassroots journalism like that on these ambitious, beautiful, wild stories and podcast series. That's really inspiring. And also there's been crossover into our own show. One of these collaborations ended up in a really one of our most popular challenging stories on Invisibilia about call out culture in the Richmond hardcore scene.
Yeah, we have the Story Lab workshop this year has a story about basic income, universal basic income, I think coming out of New Orleans. And then we have a policing project that we're supporting from California, where they opened up the police records of folks who are policing the police and the tapes of the investigation. So there's going to be a podcast about that. And so we're trying to integrate the great ideas coming in from around the public radio system. I think we're running out of time here, folks. Sadly.
I want to thank Kia and Yowei for taking some time out of. I know that. When does episode 2 drop?
Tomorrow morning, as soon as I finish it.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing, guys.
Well, thank you for being here. That's called Just in Time Publishing.
Even so further.
Wish us luck.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I think everybody, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And yeah, thank you guys for taking the time to be here. And thank everybody for spending the time with us. The support is, as Anya said, I mean, it's support from donors and people who are passionate about the work has always been, the cornerstone of pushing NPR's impact forward. And the key moment we're at right now is that that support, it'd be great if we could transition it or at least expand it beyond just radio and understand that this podcast work that we do is so impactful and is really where the next generation of audiences are.
Thank you all. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So much.